Well, tell me, mama, what's going on? Tell me, darling, what's going on?
Welcome back, everybody. The Bacon and Egg Show, episode number 62, September 12th, 2021. Jay, what is going on?
I got to tell you, man, not a whole lot of positivity down here at the beta location of the Bacon and Eggs Empire. It was a rough one yesterday for Austin sports, the teams that we like to talk about, but we're gonna fight through it today and see if we can solve all the world's problems. How are you doing, man?
I'm good. Everything else considered, doing pretty well. After a little break last week, little holiday week and stuff, we're back. I guess just want to give a shout out. We set all kinds of records with the viewership for our Texas football preview show. So thanks to everybody for tuning in on that. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you are watching, and get some bacon and eggs fresh to your inbox every week. But yeah, I mean, where do you want to start, man? We got a lot to hit on today. There was as you mentioned, a little bit of a non-positive sports experience in the Austin metro area yesterday. So
not a lot of PSE going on yesterday, but let's start with some positive local sports here, at least local to the area. We've got Texas State Bobcats, the Fighting Jake Spavital's beat the Florida International Panthers last night in overtime, 23-17. Brock Sturgis with a couple of rushing scores there. And, Spavital has Texas State in a really interesting position because they play in the Sun Belt. It's a conference that it doesn't exactly blow the doors off of things. And that's the kind of conference that is, if you just get a couple of bounces to go your way, you're going to be in the running to win that thing. And Spavital comes with the pedigree. He comes with the very highly regarded, I guess, because of some of the stops that he's made before, some of the coaches that he's coached under. And Texas State is, people say San Marcos is a fun place to live. It's, right down the street from Austin too. And, he's got an opportunity here to turn this program into a legitimate Sun Belt contender. But a good win last night for the Bobcats in overtime. So that I wanted to start the show off on something positive, man, for the area, because we're going to get into some not so fun stuff here in a little bit, but it was good to see the Bobcats come out with a victory last night.
Yeah, they're like you said, it's kind of an interesting time for their program, and also just for schools in the Sun Belt in general, kind of with this conference realignment that you're seeing that's happening, with Texas OU moving to the SEC, and now you have these four schools that are now moving into the Big 12 coming up from the AAC. And then it's going to be interesting to see kind of what schools potentially kind of take that next step up into conferences like the AAC and Conference USA or whoever, into kind of the, I don't want to call it I guess we don't refer to it as the Division I or no, like the football bowl subdivision or whatever the hell we're calling it these days. But I mean, Texas State, they put up a good fight against Baylor opening week. Yep. They, that was a close, the 29-20, I think was the score. So it's going to be interesting, especially in the state of Texas. You mentioned Brock Sturgis. That's a guy who played his high school ball at Allen and put up a hell of a senior season there. And Allen is always loaded with talent. So the fact that Texas State is pulling in, these players that might not be getting, which is interesting. I don't know what his story was there, why he didn't get why there wasn't as much attention, I guess, but good for Texas State to land a guy like that. And he's showing out for them. So, that is a good positive note to start on. Good positive sports experience there.
Got to start with the PSE because, man, I know you said just now coming back that, Bacon and Egg Show is back. Let me tell you something. After watching that Arkansas game last night, I feel like Texas is a little less back than maybe any of us thought. At least it looked at last night, man. So let's go ahead and dive on into the Longhorns.
Yeah.
Kerry, I mean,
Yeah, dive into it right off the top of a,
like,
right off a bridge into the.
Yeah. where do we even start, man? Like, where? I mean, it was a ugly loss, 40-21 on the road, in Fayetteville. Just a lot of things didn't look right, man. Like, and Sarkisian, to his credit, was just like, man, I don't know what it was. We just didn't play great. And it's like, well, no kidding, coach. Like, yeah. I mean, we all watched the game and we know you didn't play great. But I mean, where to start, man? Where to start on this?
I don't know. I mean, I'll start here, I guess. The scoreline could have been a lot worse. A lot worse. It was there at the end of the second half. I mean, Arkansas kneeled out the clock to finish it out. Very reminiscent of that Texas Bowl against Charlie Strong, where like it just could have been even worse. They had an opportunity at the end of the first half to try to go down and get more points, and they could have, because Texas wasn't stopping them. They could have easily hung a 50 spot on Texas last night. Not like 40 is that much better, but I think that's the thing. You go, oh, a 19-point loss. It actually felt worse than that, and probably, I guess it all levels out in a way, but like that was a really, really bad loss last night. I mean, in your mind, where is Arkansas going to finish this season? And are they a 7-5 type team?
Yeah. Yeah,
at
you
best.
Hit it on the head for me. They're a 7-win team.
At best. Their quarterback looks, I mean, he had a hell of a game last night, but I mean, you talk about a one-dimensional team. And we'll get to this about kind of my concern going forward, but for Texas to go up there, and I know it's a hostile environment. I know that, it's Fayetteville. I get all that. But to just look so unprepared, to look so deer in headlights is really concerning for me. And it's talking about, oh, well, Sark knows the SEC. He knows, well, yeah, you would think he would know like what this team would be going into. You would think, these players have played in hostile environments before. They're going to be playing in a lot more of them this year, especially like we talked about in the preview show, given the Big 12 and SEC stuff and all these things. How did this team look so unprepared? And to me, that comes down to coaching. That is getting a team amped up. That's getting a team ready to come out of the tunnel and having them look ready to go and prepared for what they're about to walk into. And I put that on Sark.
100%. I mean, that's exactly the sort of thing that we thought was going to be behind us when you bring in Sarkisian, because we got used to Longhorn teams under Charlie and the Mac Brown, and then into Charlie Strong's tenure, and then into Tommy Boyd's era, like this showing up with a lack of preparedness, with a lack of almost like, how do you not have the fire? How do you not get up for this game? Because Arkansas is going to get up. You knew they were going to be up for this. This is their Super Bowl. Like, they play in Texas. They hate Texas. And that might be a part of the problem here, is that some of these players still don't understand how to have that vitriol, that hate, that like just pure disdain for their opponents, like every single team that they will face will have for them. It's almost like that's been coached out of this program.
Yeah.
Like, no, every single week you're Texas and the target is on your back. And you have to prepare and play accordingly. And that's the sort of thing that I thought we were going to get out of Steve Sarkisian. And 2 games in, this doesn't look like the sort of prepared, hair on fire, just like ready to do whatever it takes to win, defend your quarterback when he gets late hit, like doing those sort of things. And we'll hit on that later when we get into the offensive line, which was atrocious. Like, it doesn't look like a team that's ready to be quote unquote Texas and take on all comers and take on, everybody's best shot which is what you know you're going to get when you're Texas. It didn't look like that last night. Sarkisian, before the game, earlier in the week, I mean, he said, like, this is big boy football. If you're not ready, these lines are going to punch you in the mouth and knock you on your ass. I don't know if that's the exact quote, but it was something really close to that.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. We saw it on both sides of the ball. The offensive and defensive lines got their asses kicked by some big old guys that wanted to kick their ass. And they let it happen. I mean, it was not the type of – it was not what I was hoping for out of this first big marquee matchup. The Louisiana game, I'll give you, like, you know, we hyped it up. That is a good club, by the way. That Louisiana Lafayette, well, that's just Louisiana. That is a team that's going to win a lot of games this season. That was a pretty good win. And then to come out a week later and lay an absolute egg to get shut out in the first half is embarrassing. And they just didn't look like they were ready to come out. And I mean, and to be honest, only give up 19 in the first half with all things considered, I thought the defense did a good job.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Like there was, you know, they held them to field goals in situations where they had to, like, and that's, I mean, not like the defense had a sparkling night by any measure. I mean, but if you're going to measure anything, it'd be off that, is that the defense did come up with some big stops at the time to hold them to field goals, or else it could have been really, really ugly. But yeah, I just don't understand it. I can't believe it took only 2 games into this season for me to actually give Tom Herman credit for something. And that is, he never lost a game by this many points in his entire tenure at Texas. This is the worst margin of victory for a Texas football team since Charlie Strong's last game against TCU in 2016. That was a 22-point loss. So if I'm going to, here it is, mark the tape. As much as Tom Herman's, like, you know, as much as we talk about it, the one thing he did is he never let his teams get blown out. They they let teams hang around too much and play down to their competition, all those kinds of things. They never got blown out. They never lost games like this. And, you know, who knows if he was the coach this season, they might have turned out that way, but like, maybe would have lost to Louisiana. But so I'm not going to give, not too much credit there, but that's what kind of bothers me here is this, like, I don't know. There's just it was such a 180 from that Louisiana game. After the Louisiana game, we talked about how it was such a clean ball game for Texas with the penalties, they just looked sharp. They looked prepared. They looked like a team that we hadn't really seen in a number of years in terms of just executing and playing clean, disciplined football. And I don't know. I don't know if you want to count it down to like this team just being undisciplined last night versus just getting the shit beat out of them. Like just running into an opponent that just beat them down. And yeah, I don't know. It's confusing to me. Let's get into some kind of individual, like some kind of, let's take it in a little bit. Let's start with the quarterback play. Not a great night for Hudson Card by any measure. First start on the road, those caveats there. We won't break down too much of his individual play so much as what do you think Sark should have pulled him earlier? Oh
yeah, absolutely. 100%. And at this point you look back at it and it's like, well, you could pick any number of points. Like personally, I think I would have come out of the half with Thompson. I was ready at that point when, 0 points in a half.
Yeah.
And I don't think, I think he's smart enough to understand why it would have happened. But the thing you're looking at is if Casey Thompson comes in there at halftime and leads this team back to a win, I don't think you can go back to Card at all. I think that instantly becomes Thompson's job. Whereas the way that it was handled right now, I still think Hudson Card is the starting quarterback against Rice. Whether that's the right decision or not is not what I'm saying. I would have taken him out earlier, but I think that the way that Sarkisian handled this leaves the door open for Card to still be the starting quarterback against Rice. And that, to me, it's are you playing the transfer portal game here? Are you trying to keep quarterbacks happy, or are you trying to win football games? And that's a balance that these coaches are going to have to try to. It's a very thin line to walk across. And yeah. I feel like with what Thompson has shown, and again, we don't have a season's worth of data on Casey Thompson. We've got a handful of games
right
here and there. Spot duty is basically what he's amounted to.
Yeah, a half in a bowl game and a little bit against Louisiana, and then what we have last night. I mean, but that's still more than what we have with Card on the table. So it's
exactly. But I think Sarkisian is talking out of both sides of his mouth in terms of who the quarterback could still be. Who, I guess, what the situation will be. What's the phrase I'm looking for? He's hedging his bets.
Yeah.
In terms of who's going to be available and who his guy will be.
Yeah.
But regardless, the play from Card, the decision making was slow, the feet were slow, everything seemed a half second behind. Whereas when Thompson gets in, he's up to speed with the game. I know he was put in later, and the defense is a little more tired, and you're not getting that. But he's still, the heart is there. And this is what I said last night in the group text with you and Mike. I needed to see some sort of heart last night.
He was the only
somebody.
one.
And
he was the only one.
Casey Thompson was it, man.
Yeah.
So I'm in the camp that Card will be the starter against Rice. Again, I'm not saying right or wrong, but I think Card will be the starter. But what do you learn from that, from a game against Rice? That's the biggest thing for me is if you start Casey Thompson and he goes out and blows the doors off, what do you learn? It's Rice. So anyways, man, the quarterback play was troubling for me, especially the first 2.5, whatever quarters it was. Card did not look like he was ready for prime time yet. But again, like you said, he's a freshman going into a hostile environment, first road test, and the stage looked too big for him there.
Yeah.
What was your assessment of the quarterback play last night?
Yeah, we're pretty close on the timing of when we think Card should have been pulled. I thought him coming out to start the second half, having that first drive to start the second half, I was like, okay, I'm fine with this. Let's see what he can do coming out of the room. And, can he put whatever adjustments were made, whatever the coaches talked to him at half to kind of settle him in, let's see what he can do to start off the second half. And it was 3 and out. And it was like, for me at that point was like, okay, now it's Thompson time. And we didn't get that till later, but yeah, Casey came in and showed heart. I think, that's one of those kind of like, it's hard to measure. It doesn't show on the stat sheet thing when you go like, oh, well, look at the heart, look at the intangibles. That's why they're intangibles. But it's, you definitely saw some spark from him. You saw a little bit of spark from the players on the offense when he came in. As we talked about this preseason, leading up, throughout this quarterback battle in the spring and up to, our preview before, this was officially announced as, with Card being the starter, the kind of difference with the two, and that when things run on schedule, Card is the guy that would seem to be putting the plays together. But when things fell apart, Thompson is the one that seems to be able to make plays. We saw that last night. And I don't know if Sark maybe didn't quite realize just how bad this offensive line is up until last night. Like, I know we talked about like, well, it was kind of a concern, and then we were hearing things and it seemed like it was turning into a plus. And then it seemed like after the Louisiana game, it was like, okay, maybe there is some concern there. And I think we found out last night, this offensive line is bad. Like, this is a bad offensive line.
Yeah.
And for me, that's what changes this whole quarterback battle dynamic. And that I think with what Casey did in the second half last night, I think with, just the energy and the fight that he showed in a lost cause, when he could have gone out there and just kind of hung his head, gone through the motions and pouted about not being the starter, he didn't do that. And I think given how bad this offensive line has shown itself to be, I think he's going to start against Rice. I think this quarterback competition's open again, and I think Casey earned his shot to start against Rice, which, you mentioned Sark kind of hedging his bets on this quarterback battle and kind of trying to play both sides. When have we ever seen that work? Like and especially at a place like Texas where like, as this thing starts to play out, I think we talked about it in the preview show. It's like, this was kind of like the nicest, like amongst the fan base, all this thing, like the most cordial and friendly quarterback battle amongst the fans that we've seen ever, maybe short of the Colt McCoy, Jevin Sneed thing, where we just didn't have any knowledge on them, where it was this like, which in retrospect, I guess that kind of changed during Colt's freshman season when people were like, put Jevin Sneed in the game, get this guy out of here. Like, this has the potential to kind of go off the rails a little bit.
Absolutely.
You're having people that, and again, I picked Card to be the starter based on some factors that I was seeing through the spring and all those things, but I've mentioned it before. Like, I'm not like over here in camp Card. Like, to me, it was just like, oh, well, this is what I think Sark is going to do. It wasn't like my starting guy is Card, but you know how fan bases are. It's going to turn into the Thompson camp and the Card camp. And until Sarkisian gets this thing nailed down, this is going to just be, it's going to be all the talk on radio. It's going to be all the discussion, like all those things, when really it should be, look at the other issues. No quarterback is going to have a ton of success behind this offensive line. And I think even if, let's say Casey Thompson or Card start against Rice, and like you mentioned, they put up a hell of a game. They're going to put numbers on, well, it's Rice. They should be able to put up a decent game against them. Well, with Tech coming the following week, then where do you go? Who do you turn to? Who's going to be the starter? And I still don't think we're going to know who the starting quarterback is going to be by then. And we may not even know until after the Tech game. We may not, like, given what this defense, how they got gashed by Arkansas. We'll get to the defense in a second. This quarterback thing needs to be sorted out. I feel like if Thompson starts next week and puts up a good game, he's earned himself a start against Tech. I think it's a comfortable place for Sark to go, the more experienced quarterback, to be able to kind of come back off of starting the freshman and saying, okay, maybe the lights were a little too bright for him early on. We're going to go with the guy that can do something behind a non-existent offensive line. So yeah, it's going to be a fun battle into what'll probably be like week 6.
Maybe.
Because TCU's defensive line is not going to allow Texas to do much on the offensive side of the ball. That's not going to be, it needs to be figured out by TCU basically.
And the reasons, the things that you just described in terms of being the quarterback that can fight through some of this adversity, that has some experience, that has been in the trenches with the people in the roster. That's why I was thinking that Thompson would have been the guy from Jump Street, you know? And that was, again, like, neither of us were just like, well, if it's not Card, that's trash. If it's not Thompson, it's got to be Thompson. No, neither one. No. And Mike wasn't like that either on the previous show. But that was my opinion going in, was that Thompson was the better fit for what needed to happen immediately. And Sark's probably thinking long term.
And see, that's kind of where I was coming from, in that everything was like working within this vacuum and in a perfect world, where that's my mistake of thinking like, oh, well, he's going to go with Card if the offensive line is good and the wide receivers are good and all these things, and everything else was taken care of. And obviously they're not. And that completely changes the dynamic.
Right. It's not close. It's not close either. So, before we move on to the offensive line here, the quarterback battle, this is going to stretch out through the whole season. I think we know that. Like, barring an injury, we're going to see 2 quarterbacks all year. I just feel like that's going to be the case. I don't feel like somebody's going to step up and take this job. I'm waiting on Thompson to make that first mistake and see how he responds. I just don't know at this point, how easy Coach Sark is just going to have to, if he's going to do it, he's just going to have to pick somebody and roll, and maybe it's the Oklahoma game, maybe, because he got, again, what do you do? What do you do there? If Fayetteville was too big of a stage for Hudson Card, is the Cotton Bowl going to be any better? Like, I don't know.
Talk about a team that bounced back after a shaky week one.
No kidding.
Was it 74-0 last night?
So, yeah. So you mean something like that. So you have, these are all things that he gets paid a lot of money to figure out. And his coaching staff gets paid a lot of money to figure out. And it didn't look like they had much figured out last night, to be honest with you. And again, young quarterback on the road, first road test, really hostile environment. Fayetteville was just, they were selling Beat Texas T-shirts in their Walmarts. I mean, like,
frothing at the mouth, either. Man. They were. That's not a knock at Fayetteville and Walmarts. That's a fact. They had their Walmarts were full of Beat Texas stuff, and I'm sure it all sold out. I mean, they hate Texas, and Texas was not prepared for that. And if they didn't sell it out before the game, every's there today picking it up to commemorate the big win over Texas. Like, that's a rivalry. Yeah. That's hatred.
And Texas hasn't been good enough to throw their weight around in any rivalry over the last, 12, 13 years? Like, it doesn't
Jay,
even feel like
that's not true. That's not true. There's Rice.
Yeah.
That's
Jesus,
come on, man.
Oh my God. Oh,
you have to remember all the rivalries here. Okay. You can't just throw a blanket statement like that and forget that Texas has dominated Rice since '94.
Yeah. Well, as the coach said that lost that game, you can't expect to beat Rice every year. So who knows what's going to happen this year.
Remember, we were in formerly named Reliant Stadium to watch Garrett Gilbert. What was that, a 34-17 Texas win there? 34-17-ish?
2 scores-ish.
2010? Yeah, we were in the building for that. And that was, I mean, if you couldn't feel the rivalry within that stadium, I don't know what to tell you.
Jeez. Man, I can't. And this is not – if Texas doesn't come out and drop 50 on Rice, like, there is a huge problem. Now let's move on to the offensive line, man, because I mean, this is.
Well, I'm ready to move on from the offensive line because this unit is not it, man.
No,
like,
and we thought
it ain't it.
We thought that this was going to be leading up to our preview show. We were sort of like, yeah, this might not be the greatest unit. And then leading up,
we got duped again, man. We got duped again is what happened.
Yeah,
the insider reports, all the stuff coming out of camp, all those things, but everybody looks so good, all that stuff. We fell for it again.
Yeah, we did. We fell for the iron sharpens iron bit. We fell for the
weight room bit, the whole thing.
We fell. Everybody, the development. This so and so is only playing one position this season, and he's focusing all on that. And I gotta say that the left side, I mean, I'm going to be honest.
All sides.
Anybody not named Derek Kerstetter.
Well, yeah, he's it. That's the only one.
Had a piss poor game last night. I mean, Christian Jones, I just don't know if he's ever going to figure it out. Like, I know that he's finally got, and again, 2 games in with this new staff, but it doesn't look like Christian Jones is that dude. Okafor, man.
Bad.
The left side, the entire left side, and then you go to the center. Majors didn't have a great game.
No.
But the thing with him is there's no depth there. He's the guy. Unless you move Kerstetter back to center, and then all you have is a center and the rest of your stuff and the rest of your four. It's like, so you at least got to have one side of your quarterback protected. Angelau looks like he's a step behind. I mentioned last night, I feel like he should take the Rice game off and just recover. Otherwise, this is whatever's bothering him is going to linger. And man, I mean, it was bad.
The depth thing bothers me.
Flat bad.
As I think we've talked about this leading up to this season in terms of, like, you got guys like Tyler Johnson, a highly touted recruit. Is it if he can't find his way into this lineup, is he ever going to? You know, we saw some great stuff from Kerridge last.
Yep.
Like, is he gonna? Where can this guy who showed some nastiness?
Yep.
We get this guy in. Like, that's kind of what bothers me. Kyle Flood's got his work cut out for him. A guy that was, known as such a good developer of offensive line talent. And I know they just got here. They've put together, but they put together great offensive lines before their previous stops, all those things. But he was also at a place that just continued to recruit 5-star mutants every season. So
that helps. That helps.
So we're going to kind of see how this all shakes out in terms of how good of developers these guys really are. But yeah, the offensive line is a real issue. And it's not like there's anybody, guys waiting in the wings where you can go, okay, all right, maybe this like upperclassman's just not cutting anymore. It looks like it's never going to click for him. Let's bring this young guy in and see what he can do. I don't feel like that depth is necessarily there. Again, they should be able to handle business versus Rice, but and probably against Tech. But when this team starts facing real defensive lines like what they saw last night, that was a 3-man rush last night for Arkansas. A 3-man rush. God. And they couldn't even handle that. They pointed it out on the broadcast. Look at these numbers. And they were still getting action in the Texas backfield. TCU is going to wreak havoc. Oklahoma, that defensive front, is going to shred this offensive line. And that's before, again, looking towards the rest of the season. Iowa State, these teams that actually can like put some bodies up front and cause pressure. It doesn't bode well, man. And this coaching staff, I know, again, they just got here, but they got to figure this out. And that's what they're getting paid to do.
Yeah, and they need to
plug some holes, figure something out to take the pressure off of that offensive line, because man, they are not good. They're just not.
No, it's not. It's not great. And that was what I was saying last night. There was one point where I was like, hey, if Arkansas is only going to rush 3 all night, and then the next play they got to Card. And I was like, oh, well, never mind. Because again, early in the game, I'm watching, I'm like, okay, you're going to give Card time to stand there and be clean in the pocket. Wait for those crossing routes, to develop across the field. That's a formula for success for Texas. Except Arkansas knew that they would get pressure with 3 more often than they wouldn't. And they were willing to give up a couple of those, mid-range passes, because they knew the next time through, even though, a tackle, an inside lineman is getting double teamed, he still got to the quarterback and got a sack. And that was a theme that was set early on, was just like 3-man rush, Card running for his life, not being able to actually make, pull the trigger, make a quick decision, do the things that he needed to do to go through his progressions and feel comfortable. And that is a formula for disaster. It was weird to me because when we talked about the play calling a little bit, it was almost like they were calling these plays because they knew they had to get the ball out quick. So whether it's the patented Greg Davis bubble screen, whatever some of these pass plays were that were being called, they had to call some of these because the ball, they couldn't wait for things to develop. That is an issue. If you can't wait for your plays if you know you don't have 3.2 seconds or whatever in the pocket. I just made that number up, but you know what I mean? Like if you don't have the time and you're forced to throw bubble screens out on the letters, you're forced to throw quick hitches and quick posts and quick outs, and everything is, you can't even get to the intermediate level of the field like your tight ends.
Which is where I was just about to go, man.
Go ahead.
That's you hit it right on the head in terms of what did we talk about going into this season with, like, how do you help a young quarterback? I mean, obviously there's offensive line play, but that short and intermediate passing game that we discussed, and we talked about this tight end unit. and all these players in that tight end unit that can help out a young quarterback. One catch for 0 yards last night for the entire tight end unit. And that was Juan Davis. That was it. No catches for Brewer. I couldn't find the pass target numbers, but I know he was targeted once on a pass out to the sideline on a 3rd down and long that he dropped. But like, where were the tight ends in this scheme, in this game plan? Those guys should be mismatches. We talk about guys like Jared Wiley and all these guys that are mismatches for linebackers. Where was this in the game plan to help out Hudson Card instead of him either having to throw it to the sideline or throw a screen to actually get these 5-10 yard, this intermediate game out to the tight ends? It was non-existent. I don't understand that, especially when the wide receivers can't catch a thing. And like, I just don't get it. I don't understand. And we discussed the wide receiver issues leading into the season. This is a concern of ours. We saw it again last night. I don't have a lot of faith in Jordan Whittington. I know I think he led the team in receptions, but he just doesn't seem to separate. He doesn't seem to know how to make catches down the field. And he doesn't seem to know how to break tackles either. So what does he do? What is he good at besides just, looking the part?
Great point. Great question. And for me, that touchdown, what should have been a touchdown when he sort of got his body turned up, and Card could have put the ball in a better place. But if you're the number one receiver at Texas and you're going to help out your freshman quarterback, you need to find a way to make that play, because that was one where he did have separation. And the ball, like I said, it wasn't a perfect ball. But if you're number one at Texas, not number numerically on the program, but on the depth chart,
but if you're the guy,
if you're the receiver, not number one in your program, but number one in your hearts. Yeah, exactly. If you're that guy, you've got to make that catch early in the game.
Yeah.
And help out your quarterback.
He had the deep ball right off the hands.
Yeah. I'm not saying it was the best ball, but it was a catchable ball. You've got to catch that. And then you look later on where, he just flat out drops one.
Yeah, right off the hands.
And then right off his hand. And then it looks like he was, in pout mode for a while. Like a lot of these receivers giving up on their routes and like not finishing plays. And that's very concerning to me, considering the fact that, Whittington is going to be the guy. It's obvious. Like he's going to be the leading receiver. What's concerning to me, in addition to that, because Worthy still got his big plays.
I think Worthy will be fine. He looked the part to me. It's just a matter of getting the guy the ball. And to me, I think Worthy is going to be a guy that's going to be, he'll be the number one receiver by the end of the season.
Where's Joshua Moore?
Well, that's again another thing. It was reminiscent of that Oklahoma State game last year of like, he's, if not he is the most established receiver in this unit. And where was the game plan to get that guy the ball?
Yeah.
0 catches.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to knock on Moore necessarily there. I agree with you.
No, but that's what when we talk about what this coaching staff does and how Sarkisian is schemed for guys that for players to get open and to get the ball. Like, where was scheming to get the most experienced receiver in a hostile road environment, the most experienced guy in that unit, to get him the ball, and arguably your most sure-handed receiver?
Yep.
I don't even think it's arguable, honestly. I think he is the most sure-handed and your most reliable receiver in that unit, just given experience and things that he's done before. And he's come up big in big games. Where was scheming to get that guy the ball, again, to help your young quarterback try to settle? And I don't understand it. I'm glad Worthy had a decent game. Whittington, for me, I'm confused. It's like I said earlier, I'm kind of confused about what he actually does well, because he doesn't look comfortable as a natural receiver. Like the pass that went right off his hands, that looked like a DB trying to knock down a Hail Mary. Like, he doesn't look to have those natural receiving skills. He just looks like a good athlete. And I don't know, like, that's on the coaches to figure out how to get that guy the ball to maximize him. But to me, he doesn't look like a number 2 or a number 3 receiver in terms of how he gets the ball and goes.
Not right now.
Not right now.
I think he has those. I think there's some tools there that he can put together and really be that guy. But it's just.
But he shouldn't be leading this team in receptions last night. Is the thing. Like that's for me. Like given the players that are in that, like he shouldn't have. He had 5 catches, which isn't great, but that's more than double what the second leading receivers, Dixon and Worthy and Roschon Johnson had.
Right. I mean, Texas only completed 13 passes last night.
Yeah.
So, he's got.
And Bijan only had 1 catch as well, which is another thing about helping out your quarterback.
Yeah.
How does that guy only have 1 catch for 4 yards?
And Roschon had a couple out of the backfield too. They're moving those guys. I want to see them more on the field at the same time. I want to see more of the scheming like that to, where you can work the Roschon and the Bijan stuff. It seems like the kid gloves were still on with this game plan, and Arkansas took full advantage of that.
Was this
because
on that note, before I forget to ask you this, was this a roll the helmets out and win Texas mentality last night?
I don't think so. I don't think it was to that point. For me, this was I don't think Texas, I guess I'll answer your question with another question. What would give Texas football the right to think that they can roll out the helmets against anybody based on what's happened since 2010 and feel like that they can roll out the helmets against any team that they step on the field with? I have no idea. If that was the case, that's another issue that's got to have to be addressed in this locker room, because Texas is not back. Texas is not where Texas expects and should be with the football program. And I don't mean winning national championships. I don't mean necessarily contending for conference championships. I don't think winning conference championships every year. I mean playing consistent football, knowing what you're going to get every single week. Yeah, you're going to lose some games. And on the previous show, I had Texas losing 4 games this year. You and Mike had them losing 3. It's not like we thought this Texas team was going to run the table this year.
No, I think I'm revising I joked on the group text, like, can we go back and re-record the preview show? Because now a lot of things changed in my mind after last night. Maybe that's a snap, like, to be fair to Sark and this staff, this is their first real bout of adversity here in Austin. And this is what we're going to find. This is where we're going to learn a lot about them. But we might have to wait a couple weeks for that, because again, it's Rice coming up. And that's where, we might be here next week, discussing the Rice game and going, okay, everything looked good again. It looks like they sorted out these problems. But it may not be until the Tech game and maybe even the TCU game before we really see if they have sorted some of these things out. And if some of these problems persist with the defense, which we'll hit on the defense, we'll cover. I mean, there's not a ton to mention with them. We'll kind of hit on that, but with the issue with the defense against a one-dimensional offense, and the issues with the offensive line, and the issues with the receivers, and the game plan. If these things persist, I mean, I don't know. Is 7-5 the ceiling for this team this year? If those issues continue to be an issue week to week,
I feel comfortable, even though it's not going to be the exact games, obviously, that I picked, because preseason, I think you actually picked Texas to lose this game, didn't you? Or did Mike? One of you guys did.
No, I had Texas winning this game. I in my preview, I had Texas losing at TCU.
Oh, that was it.
TCU or losing to Oklahoma, and then going on the road and losing to West Virginia. But
so for me, I mean,
now the Iowa State game for me, and I know they got dealt with yesterday by Iowa.
They're struggling.
But Iowa looks like a pretty good team, by the way. But this is where some of those kind of borderline games for me, where I go, okay, but this is, now those things kind of come into question a little bit. I don't know how this team's going to match up with Oklahoma State, even though they struggled with Tulsa yesterday. But again, Tulsa's a decent team. But this is where some of those maybe question mark games where I go, okay, this will be closer than I think, but I think Texas has the talent advantage and the coaching advantage. Now I'm starting to wonder a little bit. And instead of a 3-loss season, 4 losses doesn't seem absurd, but given what we saw last night, I mean, Texas was nearly a touchdown favorite going into this game. The last line that I saw was 6.5.
6.5, yeah.
And that's what's, we're talking about an Arkansas team that at best is probably 7-5 this season. They're not a great team. And I know Sam Pittman's doing a really good job with building that program, and credit to him for having his team ready to go and what he's building there. But still, that's a one-dimensional team that plays in a brutal division in a brutal conference. They're a 7-5 team at best. If they go 7-5 this season, that's a hell of a job for Sam Pittman.
Yeah, and they very well might. I'm still comfortable with Texas at 8-4, even after last night. I feel good about that sort of being where this team will settle in, because I do think that outside of Oklahoma, we're going to see a lot of games in the Big 12 this year that are just screwy, are out of, just.
That's what
it's going to be. This is going to be, and that's why I feel like some of this will even out for Texas. I do think that Sarkisian will figure out a way to scheme some of these players in, because while the cupboard wasn't as bare as it was when Charlie Strong got here, and then again when Tom Herman got here, because Herman recruited pretty well, despite all the rest of his shortcomings. Like Herman wasn't an awful recruiter.
Well, and to be fair to Charlie as well, that team that Herman's first season, the team that he walked into there was some talent there as well.
Yeah, but then there was a drop off after that.
Yeah.
And I feel like that this team should have been in a place to where you walk in the door. But again, it's development. You can recruit 4 and 5, high 3-star, 4-star, and some 5-star guys if you're Tom Herman. But if you're not developing them, if by the time they're juniors and seniors, they're not badass football players, it's because you didn't put them into positions to be that. And this is what I feel like we're looking at here is this is why I'm giving Sark a pass before we get to the defense. This is why I'm giving Sark a pass for last night, because you're establishing a new program. You're establishing a new culture. You're trying to teach these guys how to win again, how to be winners, not just how to win, but how to be winners. There's a difference to me. And last night obviously was a step in the wrong direction, because these guys don't know how to win. They don't know how to go into these big environments and pull things off. They don't know how to play consistent football. They just don't. And this is why this coaching staff is getting paid a lot of money, is to turn this roster and what's coming in into winners, not just to win a couple of football games, but to be a winner. And that's what's been lacking on this campus and in this program for a while now. None of these guys know how to actually be winners. They can win games, but they're not winners. They don't know how to play the part of a winner. So hopefully we can see a little bit of a turnaround here. But what as bad as the offense was, Kerry, the defense wasn't exactly, gangbusters either. I mean, this was an all around just poor showing by both sides of the ball. And we didn't even get into special real quick, because I know we won't spend a lot of time on special teams. Cameron Dicker has got to make his field goals, and he can't drop punt snaps. Okay, period. Like, no, you can't make mistakes like that. And period. Like, he's got to be better, man. Sorry, I just wanted to throw that in because I know we weren't going to spend a ton of time on that.
He has to be. I didn't agree. Well, I don't want to go too much into this. I didn't agree with him being the punter. I don't like specialists doing double duty. I think just keeping him at place kicker, do kickoffs, do extra points, do field goals. Like, I think that's a program like Texas should have a punter, a specialist punter. I know Buchevsky's had some health problems, those kinds of things, but like find a punter. Dicker
Yep.
shouldn't be doing that. I know, we went from joking about him not reading his pass progressions as a backup punter to now him not even being able to take the snap. I mean, it just, yeah, he's got to be better. He missed kicks against Louisiana. He's missing kicks. Like, for a guy that's been on campus as long as he has, he's kind of regressed. And that's a different, I mean, his field goal percentage is not great.
Mm.
He's gone from kind of a plus player to now just it's an adventure with him. And I don't know. We'll see. If he continues missing kicks like this, I mean, it might be, yeah.
I mean, the guy with all the leg in the world, a guy that'll probably get a look at the next level as well. But, you don't know if he's going to make an extra point or a 30-yard field goal. It's like, it's an adventure with them. And
Rose had the bad haircut, and that put people against him initially, that goofy picture of him. And Dicker hit a big kick against Oklahoma earlier in his career to get people on his, the famous wink and everything before he goes out there and hits it. And everybody falls in love with him. But honestly, there's not a ton of difference between the guys,
Yeah. But, well, he's got to be better. But all right, let's move on to defense, man. I mean, how do we even, I mean, I got a pretty good idea where I would want to start. Where would you want to start with this defense? Yeah.
Missed tackles. Thanks to our buddy Rod Babers. He on his rewatch.
Rod.
Yeah, Rod B. His rewatch of the game, which God bless him for doing that. He went back, he said his conservative count was 20 missed tackles by the Texas defense. The most by a Texas defense since the Oklahoma game in 2019, where they missed 21 tackles. And the highest last season was 19 against Texas Tech, and that just absolute barn burner of a game that Texas somehow won, but still that insanity in Lubbock. That is not good. And that's, again, his conservative count. I bet upon a second or third rewatch, there's probably more in there, which I don't wish that upon anybody, let alone one rewatch.
Why would you watch that game? Yeah, no kidding, exactly.
So that you have the missed tackles, and then giving up 333 rushing yards. What was it, 7.4 a clip?
Yep.
Is what it came out to be. And I saw that was the worst number for a Pete Kwiatkowski defense since 2010 when he was at Boise State. To call this a shredding is like, that's being, that's not giving shredders, enough respect. Like, this was an absolute, I mean, what do you even call it? Like, and that's, again, it could have been worse. This was a one-dimensional team. This was a team, you knew exactly what they were going to do. Exactly. They were talking about on the broadcast about how they were, Arkansas was shopping around for transfer quarterbacks until their guy had a decent game against Mizzou last year. And they're like, all right, we'll hang on to him. Promised him the job. And like, good for Sam Pittman with the relationships and all those things. But like, that guy's not, they were trying to make Cam Newton comparisons, please. Because he's a big kid that can just kind of like fall forward and get you 3 or 4 yards. He's not that dynamic. And he tore up Texas. He's in the bottom. I say this because of no disrespect to him, but he's going to be in the bottom tier of the quarterbacks that Texas faces this season.
I agree.
And that's where
it made him look like a world beater.
Yeah. And that's what he had a great game. And it's a huge win for Arkansas. But like, when it's all said and done and you look at the quarterbacks Texas is going to face throughout this season, he's not going to be in the top half of them. That's concerning. And it's, we talk about the rushing yards. We still don't know. Again, we kind of talked about this, the defensive backs on this team being a potential if with this team. We kind of go, okay, well, there's some experienced guys back there. We kind of were talking about them in the same tone that we were discussing the offensive line and wide receivers in the preview show. Like, oh, well, let's see, there's some experience there. Let's see if they can put it together. I think BJ Foster had a good night. I know he had
I
the
agree.
interception, but that looked like the BJ Foster that we were expecting. It was mentioned in our group text. Like that looked like the BJ Foster we recruited. He looked like the early BJ Foster that balled out against USC and just looked like the guy that we were expecting. If he could keep that up, I feel a bit better. But consistency's always been the key with him. But we haven't seen this team against and that where the Tech game might be interesting, a passing attack. And I'm concerned about what this defense is going to be this year.
If you're watching that film, why would you do anything except run against this team? You know, like why? I mean, I know that's like with some of these like going into Big 12 play, it's like sling it around the yard, but why wouldn't you just rush the ball 35 times against Texas, 40 times with what you've seen? Like if you know you can push the defensive line around, if you know that you're going to average 5 yards a rush before contact is even made. That's what Arkansas averaged 5 yards per rush before contact last night. Why would you do anything different? Why wouldn't you just run the ball at Texas? Now, I know, granted, every offensive line isn't going to look like Arkansas's offensive line. And that was a big part of, you know, Sarkisian coming in was like, hey, this big boy football, they're going to put you on your ass if you ain't ready. And Texas wasn't ready. They ran it down their throats all game long, 333 rushing yards. And you knew what they were going to do.
Yeah.
You knew exactly what they were going to do. You knew that they weren't going to make KJ Jefferson be Peyton Manning. You knew it. And they still found a way to average 7.4 yards a rush for 333 yards, and do whatever they wanted to on the ground against Texas, whenever they wanted to do it. I mean, is there a position group of, the defensive line was just, after what I felt like, and I think a lot of us felt like, that again, like this defensive line with the interior of the line, with as much talent as on the interior of the line, I feel like I sort of fell victim to thinking that was going to just make everybody around them better, including those edge rushers who were, basically non-existent. You've got basically, for this team on defense, you've got Overshown and BJ Foster, for me, were really the only two guys that I feel like they could walk out of that game and feel like at least decent about their performance.
Right.
Those two, that's it. Outside of that, who else would you point at and say, man, I know some people struggle, but they had a good one? Nobody, man.
Nobody.
And that was it. It was Foster and Overshown for me, and that's not going to get it done. It might not get it done against Rice. Like, if those are the only two guys that look like they're ready to be there, that's bad news, man. That's a bad recipe. And it looked like, again, this is not your normal Pete Kwiatkowski defense. Like, this is for me, I feel like this is not the norm for what we will see eventually as he learns more about his about the players that he has to play with. But it wasn't a good introduction to big time football for this defense under this regime. Period. Nope. It was awful.
No, and that's what
piss poor.
Yeah, they got to get their heads right for Rice, and we'll see. I mean, we'll see it. You know, we'll see what they can do. We'll get to see what the action looks like against them, because I think Rice scored some points against Arkansas the week before too. I think they had a halftime lead over Arkansas last week. So
that was a game for 2.5 quarters. I mean, seriously, like it was more of a game than this game ever was. Period.
Yep.
Say what you want about Rice. That game that they played, it was much more of a game than this one was. That you at least had a little bit of doubt going in. No, halftime. I mean, scored some points. You go and you have a lead. Obviously, Texas never had a lead in this game because they got shut out in the first half. But that was more of a game. That was a better effort than we saw last night. Period. Give Rice credit. And if Texas doesn't give Rice credit going into this game on Saturday, we're going to be sitting here next weekend having another, but that would be a completely different discussion, because they better not roll out the helmets against Rice. They better not.
Find out. We will certainly find out.
That's the thing, is like, and we talked about this with the quarterbacks too, but it's a double-edged sword here playing Rice coming off of a game like this, because you should be able to have a chance to lick your wounds. You should be able to have a chance to sort of relearn what it's like to have some success. You should. But if you just go out there and you half-ass it and you look like you don't want to be there, like a lot of these Texas players did last night, and you give up, it was hard to watch, because the effort, that's my biggest thing that I have to have change. It's not the play calling. It's
just the want to.
The court. It's the energy. It's the intangibles. It's the heart. It's caring.
Yep.
About being on the field and wearing that Longhorn on the side of your helmet, not just rolling it out there and saying, "Hey, there it is." Yep. Kiss the ring, because we're the Longhorns, because we're Texas. Play like it then. If you want to say, "Well, we're Texas," well, you ain't. Then you have to actually back something up. You can't just keep saying that over and over and over again, and then you come out and you get your ass handed to you. I'm okay with losing. I said that in the preseason show. I'm okay with losing. I'm not okay with losing like they lost last night. When you look disinterested, I'm not okay with that. And that is the thing that I need to see. That's the biggest change that I need to see out of this from into next week and then into conference play, is look like you want to be there. It's okay to lose sometimes. You're going to lose. This is college football. This isn't tiddlywinks. Like, people lose. It's okay. But just look like you want to be there. Don't lose because of a lack of effort, a lack of drive. You should want to be able to pull this program. You should want to be the guys to pull this program back out of obscurity, which is what Texas has lived in since 2010. Obscurity. And it doesn't, judging off of last night, it doesn't look like, if you're just basing it off of last night, it doesn't look like Texas is exactly taking the steps to get out of that. I know it's week 2, new head coach. I know all of that. But if you're just going off of what you show me, who you are, should I believe you right now that effort that you gave last night is who you are? And that's my biggest struggle here, is I don't want to believe that that's what this program is at this point, because I had high hopes coming in that we weren't going to see a lot of that this year. But show me. Just show me that you care. Show me that you have pride. Because outside, and I'll throw Bijan in that mix. I'll throw Casey Thompson in that mix. I'll throw Kerstetter in that mix. But outside of that, I thought Kelvontae Dixon looked fine. But there weren't a ton of guys that I'm like, man, their head was in it. They were all in. And that's got to change. Immediately. It's got to change.
We'll see what we get. We'll see what we get next week. It should be at least see what the intensity looks like against Rice. So it's going to be a fun one, I guess. But well, man, we're kind of up against it on time here today. Let's do a quick. Well, I don't even know how much. Some La Zona Verde last night on the breakfast wrap here. Going into Houston, losing 3-0. First goal is like 45 seconds in. This is a bad soccer team right now, playing really bad soccer, and the table doesn't lie. They're last place in the West, and I know it's an expansion team, but they got to figure some things out. this kind of last half of the season here. So nothing to even really report or discuss on that besides they're just bad and they're playing badly.
Yeah, and again, it just seems to be a lack of want to. It's a theme in Austin, right? Maybe something in the water. Like it's just a lack of want to, a lack of just being there, and it's a lack. I don't want to necessarily use pride too much because I know guys are out there and they're trying, but it appears like it's rough. It's hard to watch. It's not fun to even watch. It's like you give up that goal in the first minute, and it's like, fuck, here we go again.
Yeah, you knew it was coming.
You knew exactly what it was going to be, and they proved us right. Where it was just like, oh, I'm not even gonna. Yep. There was an opportunity for some channel surfing back and forth last night. And what do you want?
Saw everything I needed to see in the first minute. So,
do you want to get punched by somebody with their left or their right? Because that's what it was with the Longhorns and Austin FC last night. You pick a.
Why not both?
Pick. Well, and that's what happened. I mean, that's what ended up happening. It ended up being both. He got punched on both sides of the mouth last night. Not a great night for Austin sports, man.
No,
not a great night for Austin sports. But
there's always next week.
There's always next week, man. And we just got to go. Let's go 1-0 this week, Kerry.
That's right.
Let's do it.
That's all we need to do. Let's do it. Oh man,
let's go 1-0
that was cathartic. It's good to always get it out, So, we'll see. But yeah, we'll call this one here, and we'll see what we're looking like next week. So,
hopefully it's a different conversation, man.
Hell yeah. Hopefully,
let's take it to Rice. Let's put it on that ass. Tune up for conference play. Let's see Hudson Card get his feet underneath him. Hopefully, this offensive line can do anything against Rice and try to build up some sort of confidence. And let's keep the missed tackles under 8. That to me is what I want to see. I mean, really,
you're asking a lot, man.
I know, but hey, they only had 7 against Louisiana Lafayette. Let's keep it. That's my goal, is to get back to that number for Rice. And let's just see some heart. Let's see some freaking heart, man.
Let's do it. Yeah, let's see. It's got to get back on the right track. So, well, we'll see what we're talking about next week. It'll show itself. So
it will. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thanks everybody.
You guys sticking around. Thanks for your support for the last show we did with the season preview, for making that such a big hit for us. We really appreciate that. Thanks for sticking around today. Come back next week. Hopefully, we're talking about a Texas victory.
Absolutely. Let's do it again. Thanks, everybody.
Go.
See ya.
ATX representing. Fatal, baby. Falling on 6 on a Saturday. Can the drip and swing down, let me play.